The camp's barbed wire perimeter shimmered in the Texas heat, stretching across the flat landscape like an unnatural horizon. Rows of simple wooden barracks stood in neat formation, housing over 2,000 German prisoners of war who had been captured in North Africa and Europe. It was 1944, and for Markus Foster, this dusty outpost near Hereford was as far from the battlefields of Europe as one could get while still fighting the war. Markus adjusted his garrison cap and surveyed the compound from his guard tower. At 27, he'd been deemed unfit for combat due to a childhood bout with polio that left his right leg slightly weaker than his left. The army had assigned him here instead, guarding prisoners who seemed more relieved than resentful about their captivity. "Rotations up, Foster," called Sergeant Jenkins, climbing the wooden ladder. "Anything to report?" "Just another quiet day in the middle of nowhere," Markus replied, gathering his canteen. Prisoners were working the cotton fields again. No incidents. The truth was, Markus had begun to see the Germans less as enemies and more as men caught in the same war machine that had drafted him. Many were no older than 20, farm boys and students before Hitler's rise. That didn't make them innocent, but it made them human. Still, Markus held firm to his belief that maintaining professional distance was the only way to do his job properly. Get too friendly, and you compromised everything that mattered. War's about choosing sides, his father had told him before he shipped out. There's them, and there's us. Don't you forget it. Markus hadn't. But sometimes, watching the prisoners play soccer or tend the camp's vegetable garden, he wondered if the line was as clear as everyone claimed. He kept these thoughts to himself. His job was to guard, not to question. That evening, Markus rode his horse along the outer perimeter, savoring the brief solitude. Growing up on a small ranch outside Amarillo, he'd always found peace on horseback. The familiar rhythm of hooves against dry earth grounded him, made the world make sense again. His mount, a chestnut gelding named Buck, was army property, but Markus had claimed him as his own in all but paperwork. As he rounded the eastern fence line, he noticed a slender figure kneeling in the camp garden. The prisoners were allowed to grow vegetables to supplement their rations, and someone was apparently working late. Markus rode closer, curious. "It's after hours," he called out, hand instinctively moving to his side arm. "You should be back in barracks." The figure turned, and Markus found himself looking into the bluest eyes he'd ever seen. A woman. A woman among the prisoners. "I'm sorry," she said in careful, accented English, standing slowly with dirt-covered hands. "The tomatoes needed water before morning. It will be too hot tomorrow." Markus knew there were a handful of female German POWs at the camp, nurses mostly, captured alongside medical units. They were housed separately from the men and typically worked in the camp hospital or laundry. He rarely encountered them. "You're not supposed to be out here alone," he said, his voice softer than he intended. "I have permission," she replied, holding up a crumpled piece of paper. "From Captain Reynolds. For the garden only." Markus dismounted, wincing slightly as his right leg took his weight. He took the paper and examined it in the fading light. The authorization was legitimate. "I'm Olga," she said. "Olga Jaeger." She didn't offer her hand, maintaining proper distance. "Private Foster," he replied stiffly, returning the paper. "Markus." "Your horse is beautiful," she said, her eyes moving to Buck. "I grew up riding in Bavaria. My father trained horses before." She trailed off, and Markus understood the unspoken words. Before the war changed everything. "I'd better escort you back," he said, suddenly uncomfortable with how easily the conversation had flowed. "It's getting dark." As they walked, Buck's reins in one hand, Markus noticed Olga limping slightly. "You're hurt?" he asked. Old injury, she replied. Kiel, 1943. British bombing. She offered no more explanation, and Markus didn't press. As they reached the women's barracks, Olga turned to him. Thank you for not reporting me. The garden, it gives me purpose. Something in her expression, a quiet dignity despite captivity, stirred something in Markus he'd tried to keep dormant. Recognition. Empathy. He nodded curtly and turned away, leading Buck toward the stables. That night, Markus stared at the ceiling of his quarters, remembering blue eyes and a voice that made German sound like poetry. He told himself it was nothing. Just surprise at finding unexpected grace in a place designed to contain the enemy. Nothing more. But the next evening, he found himself riding past the garden again. And the next. The camp newspaper needed a translator. When Markus saw the notice posted in the administration building, he remembered Olga mentioning her English studies at university. Without examining his motives too closely, he suggested her name to Captain Reynolds. The Jaeger woman. Reynolds considered. She's been no trouble. Clean record. Why not? And so, 3 days a week, Olga began working in the small office where the camp's newsletter was produced. The publication was mainly for the guards and administration, with a German section for the prisoners, covering camp announcements and heavily censored war news. Markus found reasons to stop by. Delivering messages. Checking security. Each time, he lingered a little longer, watching Olga's precise handwriting fill the pages, her hair, the color of wheat, falling across her face as she worked. Did you always want to be a soldier? She asked him one afternoon, as he leaned against the door frame. I'm not much of one, Markus admitted. Can't fight overseas. This is as close as I get to the real war. Be grateful, she said softly. The real war is not something to wish for. In those moments, Markus glimpsed what Olga had seen before her capture, the devastation in Europe, cities reduced to rubble, the human cost behind the headlines and propaganda posters. What will you do? He asked. After? She looked up, surprise crossing her features. After the war? I don't know if there will be anything left to go back to. She hesitated. My brother died at Stalingrad. My parents' home in Munich was destroyed in 1942. But I would like to teach, perhaps. If anyone will hire a German. The bitterness in her voice was so faint that someone else might have missed it, but Markus heard it clearly. For the first time, he considered what victory would mean for people like Olga, people who hadn't chosen Hitler but would bear the consequences of his actions for generations. People forget eventually, he offered awkwardly. Do they? Her eyes met his. Would you forget? If it were your home destroyed, your family lost. Markus had no answer. The line between them, prisoner and guard, German and American, suddenly seemed both absolute and meaningless. As summer turned to fall, their conversations continued. Olga told him about studying literature at university in Berlin before the war diverted her into nursing. Markus described his family's small ranch, the open Texas sky, the life he'd expected to live before the world erupted in conflict. He began bringing her books from the town library, Steinbeck, Hemingway, Willa Cather. She devoured them, discussing the stories with him during brief moments between duties. You don't speak to the other guards this way, do you? He asked her once, suddenly aware of how their relationship might appear to others. No, she answered simply. They don't see me. They see only a German. Only to enemy. And what do I see? The question escaped before he could stop it. A person, she said. Just as I see you. That night, lying in bed, Markus confronted the growing truth he'd been avoiding. He was falling in love with a woman he was supposed to guard, not befriend. A German. An enemy by definition if not by choice. The war might end, but then what? She would be sent back to a devastated Germany, and he would remain in Texas with nothing but memories of conversations that crossed boundaries that shouldn't be crossed. "This is madness," he whispered to the darkness. But the heart rarely obeys orders, even in wartime. The breakthrough at Normandy dominated the news that fall. Allied forces pushed across France, and in the Pacific, American troops reclaimed island after island. Victory seemed inevitable, though the fighting remained brutal. In the camp, the mood among the German prisoners shifted. Some grew despondent as Hitler's thousand-year Reich crumbled. Others seemed relieved that the end might be in sight, even if it meant defeat. For Markus, each Allied advance was a countdown to Olga's departure. POWs would be repatriated after the war. It was only a matter of time. In late October, during one of their conversations by the garden, Olga asked a question that had clearly been weighing on her. "What happens to us when Germany surrenders? To the prisoners here?" Markus hesitated. "You'll be processed for return, eventually. But Germany, it won't be the same country you left." "I know," she said quietly. "Nothing will be the same." She looked at the tomato plants, now withering in the autumn chill. "Sometimes I think it would be easier to stay here. To start again where the name a German doesn't immediately mean a Nazi." "Is that possible?" Markus asked, his heart suddenly racing. "For POWs to stay?" "I don't know," she admitted. "Probably not. We are prisoners, not immigrants." That evening, Markus visited Captain Reynolds' office, ostensibly to discuss rotation schedules. Eventually, he steered the conversation toward post-war plans for the prisoners. "Most'll go back," Reynolds said, lighting a cigarette. "Though God knows what's waiting for them there. Roosevelt and Churchill want to make sure Germany can never start another war, so the country will be divided, occupied." "What if some wanted to stay? In America?" Markus asked, trying to sound casual. Reynolds gave him a shrewd look. "There are provisions. Sponsorship, mainly. A job, housing, somebody vouching they're not Nazi sympathizers. And marriage, that's the surest way. Some locals have already made eyes at a few of the male prisoners. Girls from town thinking about their prospects after the boys come home." He narrowed his eyes. "Why do you ask, Foster? Got someone in mind?" "Just curious," Markus replied, too quickly. "Seems a waste to send skilled people back to rubble if they could be productive here." Reynolds said, unconvinced. "Just remember your position, private. These people are still enemy aliens until treaties are signed." That night, Markus paced his small room, mind racing. The idea that had been forming unconsciously for weeks now took definite shape. He could sponsor Olga. More than that, he could marry her. His family's ranch wasn't much, but it was something to build on. A place where her past wouldn't matter as much as her future. But was it fair to her? Would she see it as an offer of love or merely an escape route from a devastated homeland? And what would his family say about bringing home a German bride? The next morning, instead of his usual patrol, Markus requested leave to visit town. In a small jewelry shop on Main Street, he spent nearly all his savings on a simple gold band with a small diamond. The shopkeeper raised an eyebrow at his uniform and the purchase but said nothing. Markus kept the ring in his pocket for 3 days, waiting for courage or clarity. On the 4th day, news arrived that changed everything. Germany had suffered massive defeats on both fronts. Rumors of Hitler's bunker suicide spread. The end was coming fast. That afternoon, he found Olga in the camp library, reorganizing shelves. "Could you walk with me?" he asked quietly. "By the garden? I have something to discuss." Her eyes searched his face, worried. "Has something happened?" "Not yet," he said. "But it might." Outside, the November air was crisp, the sky that impossible Texas blue that seemed to go on forever. They walked in silence until they reached the garden where they had first spoken. "The war is ending," Markus said finally. "Germany will surrender, maybe within months." "I know," she replied, pulling her thin coat closer. "Everyone knows. I've been thinking about what happens next. For you." Olga stopped walking. "Markus, please," he interrupted, suddenly afraid of losing his nerve. "Let me say this. I know we come from different worlds. Worlds that have been trying to destroy each other. But here, in this strange place, I found something I wasn't looking for." He took a breath. "I found you. And I don't want to lose you when the war ends." Her face was very still, revealing nothing. "What are you saying?" Markus reached into his pocket and withdrew the small ring. It caught the sunlight, gleaming against his palm. "I'm saying that I love you. That borders and uniforms and politics, none of it matters to me anymore. I'm saying that if you wanted to stay in America, to build a life away from the ruins of Europe, I would. I would be honored if you would consider becoming my wife." Olga stared at the ring, then at his face, her blue eyes wide with shock. For a terrible moment, Markus thought he had misunderstood everything between them. "You would marry the enemy?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "You were never my enemy," he replied. "Just a casualty of the same war that took part of my life too. Different sides, same war." Tears filled her eyes. "Do you know what people will say? Your family? Your friends? A German wife in 1945. I know it won't be easy," Markus admitted. "But nothing worth having comes easy. And you're worth everything." She looked away, toward the camp's fence line. "And if I wanted to return to Germany? To help rebuild? Then I'd wait for you," he said simply. "Or I'd go with you, if they'd let me. But I had to ask. I had to try." Olga was silent for so long that Markus began to lower his hand, the ring catching the light one last time before disappearing back into his pocket. But then her fingers caught his. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will marry you, Markus Foster." He stared at her, hardly believing. "You will." "My home is gone," she said softly. "My family is gone. But somehow, in this place, behind these fences, I found something I thought the war had destroyed forever: hope. Love. A future." She touched his face. "You gave me that. How could I say no?" Markus slipped the ring onto her finger. It was slightly too big, but that could be fixed. What mattered was the promise it represented. "I'll speak to Captain Reynolds today," he said. "There will be paperwork, procedures. But it can be done." What happened next would live in camp legend for years. As Markus and Olga walked back toward the administration building, hand in hand, they passed the women's barracks. One of the prisoners noticed the ring glinting on Olga's finger and gasped. Words spread in whispers, then exclamations. Women emerged from the barracks, gathering around Olga, examining the ring, asking questions in rapid German. When Olga explained, the reaction was immediate and overwhelming. These women, who had lost everything, homes, families, nations, freedom, found in this unexpected engagement a symbol of something precious, the possibility that love could still exist in a world torn apart by hatred. That the human heart could still find connection across the deepest divides. They wept. Not quiet tears, but deep, cathartic sobs that seemed to release years of pent-up grief and fear. They embraced Olga, then Markus, crossing boundaries that had seemed impermeable just moments before. Some of the male prisoners, drawn by the commotion, joined the gathering. Guards arrived, alarmed by the crowd, but instead of dispersal, they found celebration. Captain Reynolds himself came to investigate. He took in the scene, the ring, the tears, Markus and Olga standing together, and shook his head in resignation. "You realize the paperwork for this will be a nightmare, Foster," he said, but there was no real anger in his voice. "Come see me tomorrow. We'll sort out what needs doing." As Reynolds walked away, Markus turned to Olga, still surrounded by her fellow prisoners. In her eyes, he saw not just love, but something more profound, recognition. Of him, of herself, of the possibility that even in the darkest times, humanity could find its way back to light. "Thank you," she whispered, standing on tiptoe to kiss his cheek, their first physical contact beyond handshakes. "For seeing me as a person, not a prisoner." "Always," he promised. "War ends. Borders change. But this," he touched the ring on her finger, "this is forever." Around them, the camp continued its strange, suspended existence, a place of confinement transformed, if only for a moment, into a place of joy. Tomorrow would bring complications, paperwork, and the inevitable challenges of building a life together after war. But today, in this unlikely corner of Texas, love had declared its own victory. And as the sun set over the camp, casting long shadows across the barbed wire, Markus and Olga stood together in the garden where they had first met, planning not for war's end, but for peace's beginning.